Most people think they know Jesus Christ, but what S.Goldsmith discovered will shatter everything you believe about spiritual power. The man you think you know from Sunday school stories is actually the blueprint for your own divine awakening. When you truly understand who Christ is, you don't just read about miracles, you become the miracle. Goldsmith spent decades unraveling this mystery that organized religion buried under doctrine and ritual. He found that Christ isn't a person who lived 2,000 years ago, but a living presence available to you right now. This isn't theology. This is practical mysticism that transforms your daily experience from limitation to limitless possibility. The moment you grasp this truth, healing becomes natural, abundance flows effortlessly, and problems dissolve before they can take root in your consciousness. You stop begging an external God for help and start recognizing the Christ presence that has always been your true identity. This is what changes everything. S.Goldsmith discovered that Jesus of Nazareth was a man who achieved something extraordinary. He became so filled with Christ consciousness that his human personality dissolved into pure spiritual being. The miracles weren't performed by a special person, but by someone who recognized his oneness with infinite source. When Jesus said, "I can of mine own self do nothing," he was revealing the secret. The human Jesus was transparent to the Christ presence flowing through him. He didn't heal people through personal power, but by recognizing the spiritual perfection that was already present in every person who came to him for help. This same Christ presence exists in you right now. It's not something you develop or earn through good behavior. It's your spiritual identity that remains perfect and whole regardless of what appears to be happening in your human experience. Jesus simply showed us what's possible when we stop identifying with limitation. The revolutionary truth Goldsmith taught is that Christ is not Jesus' last name, but a universal presence available to anyone willing to transcend their human sense of self. Every time you choose love over fear, peace over anxiety, or abundance over lack, you're allowing Christ consciousness to express through you. Most people pray to Jesus asking for help from outside themselves. But when you understand that Christ lives as your true being, prayer becomes recognition of what already is. You're not trying to get God's attention. You're awakening to the divine presence that has never been absent from your experience. This recognition changes everything instantaneously. Problems that seemed impossible to solve reveal themselves as opportunities for Christ to demonstrate its infinite power through your consciousness. You become a transparency for the same healing presence that flowed through Jesus 2,000 years ago. Here's what happens when this truth penetrates your consciousness completely. You stop seeing yourself as a human being having spiritual experiences and recognize yourself as spiritual being appearing in human form. Every challenge becomes an invitation to demonstrate the Christ presence within you. Goldsmith proved this through thousands of healings that happened when people caught even a glimpse of their true spiritual identity. Cancer disappeared, broken relationships healed, financial lack transformed into abundance, not through human effort, but through recognition of what had always been spiritually true. The same power that raised Jesus from death is the animating force of your being right now. When you truly understand this, you don't worship Christ from a distance. You express Christ as your natural way of being. This is the beginning of your transformation from human limitation to spiritual freedom. A woman came to Goldsmith's classes carrying decades of resentment toward her ex-husband. She had tried therapy, forgiveness exercises, even medication for her depression. Nothing worked. Then she heard this truth about Christ consciousness, and something shifted. She realized that holding on to anger was denying the Christ presence in both herself and her former spouse. Within 3 weeks of this recognition, her ex-husband called unexpectedly. He apologized for years of painful behavior and asked for her forgiveness. She found herself responding from a place of genuine compassion she didn't know she possessed. The bitterness that had poisoned her life for 15 years dissolved in a single conversation. This wasn't positive thinking or human willpower. When she recognized Christ as her true identity, the love that had always been present emerged naturally. Her transformation wasn't gradual, it was instantaneous. The moment she stopped seeing herself and others as limited human beings, Christ consciousness began expressing itself as healing in her relationships. A businessman facing bankruptcy attended one of Goldsmith's retreats as a last resort. He had exhausted every human solution and was preparing to lose everything he had built over 20 years. When he heard that Christ consciousness was his true identity, something clicked. He stopped panicking and started recognizing the infinite abundance that was his spiritual birthright. Instead of desperately chasing new clients, he began each day acknowledging the Christ presence within himself and within every person he would encounter. His approach to business completely transformed. He stopped trying to manipulate outcomes and started trusting the divine intelligence that knew how to prosper him better than his human mind could imagine. Within 2 months, 3 major contracts appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Companies that had never responded to his proposals suddenly wanted to work with him. His business not only survived but thrived beyond anything he had experienced before. The difference wasn't his strategy, it was his consciousness. A mother watched her teenage son spiral into drug addiction and despair. Every human intervention had failed. Counselors, rehab programs, tough love approaches only seemed to make things worse. She came to understand through Goldsmith's teachings that she needed to stop seeing her son as an addict and start recognizing the perfect Christ child that was his true spiritual identity. This didn't mean ignoring the human picture or enabling destructive behavior. It meant holding steadfast to the truth that beneath the appearance of addiction was a perfect spiritual being temporarily lost in human confusion. She stopped reacting to his behavior from fear and started responding from the Christ consciousness within herself. The transformation took 6 months, but it was profound. Her son began making different choices, sought help voluntarily, and reconnected with his family. Years later, he told her that he could feel something different in how she looked at him. Something that helped him remember who he really was beneath the addiction. These aren't isolated miracles or coincidences. When you truly understand that Christ is your spiritual identity, every area of your life begins aligning with this truth. Relationships heal, health improves, abundance flows, and inner peace becomes your natural state. This is what Jesus demonstrated, and this is what becomes possible for you. The key is consistency and recognition. Every morning, before engaging with human problems, acknowledge the Christ presence as your true being. Throughout the day, when challenges arise, pause and remember that you are not a limited human trying to fix problems, but Christ consciousness expressing itself through seeming difficulties. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with your heart and experience? Beyond recognition, Goldsmith taught specific practices to deepen your realization of Christ consciousness. The first is what he called the listening ear. Instead of constantly talking to God, you learn to be still and listen for the voice of Christ speaking within your consciousness. This isn't hearing audible words, but sensing divine guidance arising from within. Start with 5 minutes of complete silence each morning. Don't ask for anything. Don't try to solve problems. Simply listen. At first, you may hear only mental chatter, but gradually you'll sense a deeper presence. This is Christ consciousness communicating with your receptive awareness. The guidance that emerges is always loving, always constructive, always peaceful. This practice transforms decision-making completely. Instead of agonizing over choices or relying solely on human logic, you learn to consult the Christ wisdom within you. The answers that come through this listening are often surprising, sometimes challenging, but always lead to outcomes that serve your highest good. The second practice is contemplative meditation on spiritual identity. Throughout the day, especially during stressful moments, silently remind yourself, I am not a body, I am not a mind, I am not emotions. I am Christ consciousness appearing as individual being. This isn't positive affirmation. It's recognition of spiritual fact. When you're stuck in traffic, instead of fuming about delays, use those moments to contemplate your true identity. When facing financial pressure, rather than calculating limitations, acknowledge the infinite abundance that is your spiritual inheritance. When dealing with difficult people, see past human behavior to the Christ presence that is their true nature. This practice gradually shifts your entire perspective from human reaction to spiritual response. You stop being victimized by circumstances and start demonstrating mastery over conditions through recognition of what you truly are. Problems don't disappear, but your relationship to problems transforms completely. The third technique is impersonal healing through Christ recognition. When someone asks for your prayers or you witness suffering, don't try to fix the human picture. Instead, silently recognize the Christ perfection that is already present in that person. Hold this recognition steadily, knowing that spiritual truth is more powerful than human appearance. This doesn't replace medical treatment or practical action. It provides the spiritual foundation that allows human solutions to work more effectively. Goldsmith witnessed countless healings that occurred when people were held in this recognition of their spiritual perfection, even when they were unaware that anyone was recognizing this truth about them. The healing power isn't yours personally. You become transparent to the Christ consciousness that knows only perfection. Your role is simply to get your human opinions and fears out of the way so that divine love can express itself as healing in whatever form is needed. The fourth practice involves carrying Christ consciousness into daily activities. Whether you're washing dishes, conducting business meetings, or caring for children, maintain awareness that Christ is expressing itself as your activities. This transforms mundane tasks into spiritual demonstrations and ordinary moments into opportunities for divine expression. When you drive your car, Christ consciousness is directing your journey. When you prepare meals, Christ consciousness is nourishing your family. When you work at your job, Christ consciousness is serving through your professional activities. This recognition elevates every aspect of life from human effort to spiritual expression. This doesn't mean becoming otherworldly or impractical. It means bringing spiritual awareness into practical living so that everything you do becomes an expression of divine love. Your effectiveness in the world actually increases because you're aligned with infinite intelligence rather than limited human thinking. The biggest challenge people face is persistent doubt about their spiritual identity. After years of identifying with human limitations, suddenly recognizing yourself as Christ consciousness can feel impossible or even presumptuous. Goldsmith understood this resistance and addressed it with profound compassion and practical wisdom. He taught that doubt is not your enemy, but simply old mental habits that haven't caught up with spiritual truth. When doubt arises, don't fight it or feel guilty about it. Simply acknowledge it as the human mind's natural response to expanding beyond familiar boundaries. Then gently return your attention to the recognition of your true spiritual nature. The key is persistence without force. Like water gradually wearing away stone, consistent recognition of Christ consciousness eventually dissolves patterns of limitation that have governed your experience. Some days the recognition feels strong and clear. Other days it seems distant and difficult. Both experiences are part of the awakening process. Another common obstacle is trying to use Christ consciousness to get what the human self wants, rather than allowing Christ consciousness to express what divine love desires through you. This turns spiritual practice into spiritual manipulation and blocks the very transformation you're seeking. Goldsmith warned against this subtle but crucial mistake. True Christ consciousness never seeks to control outcomes or manipulate circumstances. It recognizes divine order already present in every situation and trusts infinite wisdom to unfold the highest good for all involved. When you truly align with Christ consciousness, your personal desires begin harmonizing with divine will. The solution is surrendering your human agenda while maintaining your spiritual recognition. Instead of, I want Christ consciousness to give me this specific result, the approach becomes, I recognize Christ consciousness as my true being and trust divine intelligence to express itself perfectly through my experience. Physical healing can be challenging because symptoms seem so real and immediate. When you're experiencing pain or illness, recognizing Christ's perfection as your true identity can feel like denial of obvious facts. Goldsmith taught how to navigate this apparent contradiction with both spiritual integrity and practical wisdom. He emphasized that spiritual healing doesn't ignore the human picture but sees through it to the spiritual reality that was never sick or damaged. You acknowledge what appears to be happening while holding steadfast to the truth of spiritual perfection. Medical treatment and spiritual recognition can work together harmoniously. The healing occurs not through fighting disease but through such clear recognition of spiritual wholeness that the human experience gradually aligns with spiritual truth. Some healings happen instantaneously, others unfold over time. Your role is consistent recognition, not controlling time frames or methods. Financial challenges test Christ consciousness recognition, because lack appears so concrete and pressing. When bills demand payment and bank accounts show insufficient funds, acknowledging infinite abundance as your spiritual inheritance can seem impractical or naive. Yet this is precisely when spiritual recognition becomes most powerful and transformative. Goldsmith taught that true abundance comes not from manipulating material conditions, but from recognizing the inexhaustible nature of divine supply that is always flowing through consciousness. When you truly identify with Christ consciousness, creative solutions and unexpected resources appear in ways the human mind could never have imagined or orchestrated. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform through Christ consciousness right now? Advanced practitioners learn to maintain Christ consciousness recognition even during intense emotional storms. When grief, anger, or fear arise powerfully, the tendency is either to suppress these feelings or be overwhelmed by them. Goldsmith taught a third approach, experiencing human emotions while remaining anchored in spiritual identity. You don't deny or judge emotional responses, but you don't identify with them as your true nature either. Christ consciousness remains untouched by human emotional weather, just as the sun remains bright above storm clouds. This allows emotions to move through you without defining you or controlling your responses to life circumstances. This advanced practice requires years of development, but even beginning attempts bring remarkable results. You find yourself responding to difficult situations from a deeper place of wisdom and compassion, rather than reacting from emotional turbulence. Relationships improve dramatically when others sense this spiritual stability in you. Living Christ consciousness in family relationships presents unique challenges because family members have fixed ideas about who you are based on years of shared history. When you begin expressing from your spiritual identity, relatives may resist or ridicule these changes, making it tempting to revert to old patterns. Goldsmith counseled patience and consistency without preaching or trying to convince others of spiritual truth. Your transformation speaks more powerfully than words ever could. As family members witness genuine changes in your responses, attitudes, and presence, they become curious about the source of your newfound peace and strength. Some relationships deepen beautifully. Others may become temporarily strained as old dynamics no longer work. Trust Christ consciousness to guide each relationship toward its highest expression. Your role is maintaining spiritual recognition regardless of how others choose to respond to your transformation. Professional environments often seem incompatible with spiritual consciousness, especially in competitive or ethically challenging industries. How do you express Christ consciousness when colleagues operate from pure self-interest or when company policies conflict with spiritual principles? Goldsmith faced this question repeatedly from students in various professions. His guidance was practical and profound. Be Christ consciousness in action rather than talking about Christ consciousness in theory. Demonstrate integrity, compassion, and wisdom without calling attention to your spiritual practices. Let your work quality, professional relationships, and ethical choices reflect your spiritual identity naturally. Often this leads to unexpected career opportunities as others recognize something different about your approach to work. Sometimes it means leaving situations that are fundamentally incompatible with spiritual integrity. Christ consciousness always provides guidance and opens new pathways when changes are necessary. Parenting from Christ consciousness transforms both parent and child in beautiful ways. Instead of trying to control your children's behavior through manipulation, threats, or excessive permissiveness, you recognize the perfect Christ child within each of your offspring and respond from that recognition rather than reacting to human behavior. This doesn't mean ignoring discipline or boundaries, but it means establishing those boundaries from love rather than fear, from spiritual wisdom rather than human frustration. Children sense when they are being seen truly rather than just managed behaviorally, and they respond by expressing more of their natural goodness. Goldsmith observed that children raised with this recognition develop stronger self-worth, clearer decision-making abilities, and deeper connection to their own spiritual nature. They learn to solve problems from inner wisdom rather than external pressure, preparing them for truly successful lives guided by Christ consciousness. After years of practicing these principles, something remarkable happens. Christ consciousness becomes your natural way of being rather than something you have to remember to practice. Spiritual recognition flows automatically in challenging situations. Love emerges naturally in relationships. Peace becomes your default state rather than something you achieve through effort. This doesn't mean you never face difficulties or never feel human emotions. It means you navigate life's experiences from an unshakable foundation of spiritual identity. Problems still arise, but they no longer threaten your fundamental sense of well-being, because you know who you truly are beneath all human appearances. You become what Goldsmith called a transparency for Christ. Your personality remains uniquely yours, but it serves as a clear window through which divine love, wisdom, and power can express themselves in the world. This is the ultimate purpose of understanding who Christ truly is. The ripple effects of your transformation touch everyone you encounter, often in ways you never realize. Store clerks sense something peaceful about your presence. Business associates notice your calm competence under pressure. Family members feel safer and more loved in your company. Strangers find themselves smiling after brief interactions with you. This is not personal magnetism or human charm. It's Christ consciousness radiating naturally through your transformed awareness. You're not trying to influence others or demonstrate your spirituality. You're simply being authentically yourself from the recognition of your true spiritual identity, and that authenticity blesses everyone around you. Goldsmith taught that this is how spiritual transformation spreads throughout the world. Not through preaching or proselytizing, but through individuals who have discovered their Christ nature and allow it to express itself naturally in daily living. You become part of the healing consciousness that elevates human experience. Looking back on your spiritual journey, you realize that everything led to this moment of recognition. Every challenge, every relationship, every success and failure served to prepare your consciousness for understanding who Christ truly is. What seemed like random life experiences were actually divine curriculum designed to awaken you to your spiritual identity. The person you thought you were dissolves into the Christ consciousness you have always been. Fear transforms into trust. Lack becomes abundance. Loneliness dissolves into love, and confusion gives way to divine guidance. You haven't become someone different. You've simply remembered who you always were beneath human appearances. This recognition brings profound gratitude for the entire journey, including the difficult parts that seemed pointless at the time. Everything contributed to your awakening. Everything served your spiritual evolution. Everything was guided by the same Christ consciousness that is now expressing itself consciously through your transformed awareness. Now you understand what Joel Goldsmith discovered through decades of spiritual exploration. Christ is not a historical figure to worship from a distance, but the living presence that you are. When Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he was speaking from Christ consciousness that is equally present in you right now. Your life becomes a continuous demonstration of divine love expressing itself in human form. Every day brings opportunities to let Christ consciousness flow through your thoughts, words, and actions. You don't work to become spiritual. You simply allow your natural spirituality to express itself without human interference or limitation. This is the beginning of your eternal life. Not life after death, but divine life expressing itself right now through your transformed consciousness. You are no longer a human being seeking God. You are God expressing as human being. This is the truth that sets you free forever. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new spiritual understanding and path forward.